Welcome back. I'm with Dr. Pascal. I'm Dr. Dan. Welcome to the Healthy Commute. Today we're going to be talking about head horns or phone horns. We saw this article last weekend or a week ago, beginning of July, and we saw it in the Free Press, National Post, we saw it on CTV News, we saw it all over the internet. So they were talking about now is the very first time that our body has had some anatomical or physiological changes due to our changes in posture and way of living,
That's right.
Which is pretty amazing.
Yes. And so what they're talking about here when we talk about, well, let's take a step back, I guess, and let's define what a bone spur would be so people understand. So from the very beginning, a bone spur is when there is added stress or pressure to a joint in the body or a bone. And what happens is then the body lays down more calcium in that area to support that added pressure. Now, what these authors, what these researchers are looking at here is a bone spur at the base of the skull. So if we take our fingers, basically go to the top of your ears with your thumbs and work your fingers right to the back of your skull, you should come to like a prominent little point. And this is not the first time we've seen this bone spur, but it is the first time that these researchers are saying that this bone spur is appearing in our youth.
Okay, so we've both seen these in patients in the past. Now, mostly what we've seen these in older adults, the older generation, because of poor changes to their posture, their, as a response to accidents or falls or injuries, their head, has gone quite a bit forward, rounded of the shoulders, so there's a lot more pressure and stress on those back, shoulders, and neck muscles, so now it's pulling on that area, creating that bone spur.
Correct.
But now what you're saying is now we're finding that in younger and younger individuals.
Correct. So these researchers started seeing this on x-rays in younger individuals where there's a prominent bone spur at 18, 19, 20 years old. And so what they did is they x-rayed 1,200 people, so a very large study of people between 18 and 86 years of age.
Yeah.
And what they found was that 40% of those people under 30 years old, so almost 1 in 2, had a bone spur growing, right? And that bone spur is a sign of degeneration. It's an early onset degenerative change.
Right, so what we really want to be clear on is, okay, so what does this bone spur mean? That bone spur in itself is not something that's going to harm, your health or your kid's health.
Correct.
What it is, though, it is a sign of something else going on. This is the engine light going on in your car, like alerting you that something is going on, something is brewing in the background.
Well, because we used to see this, like you mentioned, in older patients where the posture is breaking down. So this is a sign of postural breakdown that we would see later in life when someone would lose strength against gravity and they would round forward. The alarming thing is that postural breakdown sign, that degeneration, is showing up at 18, 19, 20 years of age. And in that same research, they were saying that the bone spurs are bigger in the younger patients than they are in the older patients. So that's kind of really alarming, is that at a very early age, they're developing this really big bone spur at the base of the skull, which is an indication of how much pressure there is on the spine.
Right.
So the concern is not where they are necessarily right now, because they're young enough that they might not feel any pain, but where are they going to be 20, 30, 40, and 50 years down the road? Because
we both know this, is that, let's say, our patients that are, let's say, in their 50s, 60s, 70s, that have, damage, degeneration, arthritis, pain, pressure. We know that they have not grown up with iPhones,
correct,
iPads, laptops. They did not growing up playing video games. So they have grown throughout their lifetime to develop these. So our main, concern is if our kids are growing up with that much pressure and stress in their neck, what is that going to turn them into when they're 40, 50, 60 years old? That's my real concern, in terms of being able to move around, travel, pick up their grandkids. What are they going to be able to do with that much pressure over a lifetime?
So let's explain for everybody why this bone spur is developing. So what's happening? So whether you're sitting at a computer, you're using a cell phone, I would say cell phone is the worst based on where people are holding it. But for every inch that our head travels forward, or for every 10 to 20 degrees that we bend our head forward, you're effectively doubling the weight of the head. So if my head weighs 10 pounds and I'm in proper position, it's 10 pounds of pressure on my neck, my shoulders. If my head drifts forward 1 inch, it's now 20 pounds.
So now my muscles, or your muscles in the back, now have to fire more and carry more
To
load.
double the, to work
Right.
against twice the load.
Right.
Now if I go 2 inches forward, my head is now 30 pounds, right? So it's 3 times more pressure on those muscles. And let's think of kids using cell phones. Their head is not 2 or 3 inches forward. We're talking like 5 or 6 inches or 50 to 60 degrees, full flexion of the neck where they're facing the ground.
Yeah.
And if we look at average time, I mean, I know the report said about 4.5 hours, and I think that was probably self-reported.
Yeah.
If we were to be able to look at their screen time like their iPhone reports, I'd be willing to bet that a lot of kids, especially summertime, are spending 7-8 hours on their phone. So a really large number of hours with possibly 50, 60 pounds of extra pressure on the muscles, the spine, the discs, affecting the way their spine is developing.
So there's more pressure and stress on those muscles and on the spine.
Yeah.
So what does that mean? That can translate to, whether it's now or later on, that's easy to kind of understand, neck issues, headaches, shoulder issues, tingling and numbness down the arms. We can have more pressure and stress in those areas that could cause us more harm.
Arthritis,
Absolutely.
all that kind of stuff, yeah.
Yes. So a few things that we need to understand is the position of the neck. So our neck should have a normal C-shaped curve. The discs are in the front. There should be next to no pressure on those discs. The stronger supporting joints are in the back. So when we have that curve, all the weight should be carried on those strong supporting joints. I tell patients, it's almost like those supporting walls in your house. They're carrying the load.
Right.
If you go in and reno your house and take out those supporting walls, what happens?
Things are going to fall apart.
Bad things happen. It's the same thing that would happen to your neck or anywhere else into your body. Right? So we need to hold that nice C-shaped curve. The more we have our head tipped forward into that cell phone position or laptop position or video games or whatever, now we're going against the normal body position, which means more damage.
And it's not just pain though. It's not just pain, arthritis, what we call musculoskeletal issues, right? And I think everybody can understand that, yes, you're talking about mechanics, you shift your head forward, there's more pressure. But what we forget, or what's easy to overlook, are the physiological changes, because that forward head posture is not just going to cause pain and faster breakdown, it's going to affect how the overall body functions. We alluded to this in that previous podcast where we talked about the postural breakdown in Generation Z. And we were talking about these articles that were stating where people had forward head posture, they had poor moods, basically the equivalent of more depression, and they couldn't get out of those bad moods as easily as someone that had good posture. The poor memory recall, so if the head went forward, people had a harder time having their short-term memory, right? So we know that this posture is not just about, well, hey, stand up straight because bad posture doesn't look good.
Right.
It's not only affecting pain, arthritis, and breakdown, but it's affecting how your overall body functions.
And that's the key thing for us, is why we're so passionate about posture, why we're experts in posture, is because of its effect, not just for pain, but like you mentioned, how your body physically works, right? So that's why for me, when I see that kind of damage in kids, that to me gives me a little, kind of a squeeze in my gut going, this is not right, and what could we do to help?
And sorry, go ahead.
So what can, we've gone over it in other podcasts, but quickly, where or what could patients be looking for, or what could they be doing to start to reverse that, or making sure things don't get worse?
Great. Well, that's a good thing. And we'll talk about that in just 1 second, but I'm happy though that at least this awareness is being created nationally. And I know that we've talked about this with our patients. You've been talking about this, a ton to people, and mentioning that this is where, posture is going, and it's going to be the way of the future, is taking care of our children. So we're talking about the forward head posture, but the good news is it's reversible at a young age.
Right.
The longer it stays there though, the more it will become stiffer, more permanent, and more problems. So we're talking about these tips for correction. They're great for everybody, but the younger you can start someone doing these, the more likely you are to permanently fix this and maintain a good spinal position as the youth continue to develop.
Right.
Okay? So number 1 tip, hold your phone at eye level. Imagine you're taking a picture, texting, you text just like you would take a picture of someone. So you hold your phone up with your arm so that your phone is at eye level, so your head does not have to drift forward and down to look at the screen.
The bonus of that is you get to work on your guns for the summer, right? Your arms and your shoulders. But yes, there you go.
The second one is to take breaks, right? And we've all, again, mentioned this before, just like working at a computer. Every 30 minutes, you need 30 seconds of break. No different for someone spending a significant amount of time on a phone. take breaks. So if you are with your head down, every 30 minutes get up, do a postural stretch or do something to alleviate that pressure. Okay, and postural stretches, we've gone through them before. We're just going to talk about them because you can Google them or go back on previous podcasts where we described them.
We'll put them in the show notes right at the bottom, so you could just look through. You could probably click the link as well.
Great. Okay, so those three, if you're going to Google them right away, the three favorites for this would be the Brugger relief position, the wall angel, and the head retraction. Those would be our favorite three for using that cell phone.
And all of those that have those three exercises, that what they have in common is they're all working the back part, right?
Yes.
So back of the neck, back of the shoulder, back of the rib cage. We want to bring everything back straight up. You can imagine your rib cage wants to come up, head comes back, open up the front part of the shoulders.
Correct.
That's what we need more than anything.
The other thing that you can do is use a form of orthopedic pillow or orthopedic device at home, which we call dental rolls. And so there's a thoracic dental roll, a cervical dental roll, and what those do is they're like long stretching. It's kind of like putting braces on teeth. You stretch the spine back into the position it's supposed to be in to relieve pressure as well, okay?
Yeah.
And then obviously seeing a posture professional, right? So looking for a chiropractor in your area that can help you assess why this problem is happening. Is there starting to become structural damage? They can give you specific exercises to your spine, your posture, to help you on the right track.
And also to understand, is this a neck issue, a middle back issue?
Correct.
Where do we need to start?
Originating?
If it's not just the neck, sometimes it's somewhere else, right?
Okay, yeah. And then we can also have parents create good habits and sort of instilling these habits in our children at an early age, right?
Yeah.
So, Dr. Dan, why don't you tell us about what you do with your kids?
Well, I think a key thing is to understand that this is their world. This is where they experience things. This is how they communicate. This is how they interact with friends. So it's not necessarily a point to say, okay, you'll never go on a phone again for the rest of your life. That's not realistic, but it's to understand that, okay, so how can I, number one, teach them good habits? So number one, as parents, we have to be conscious of not using our phones all the time, especially when you're interacting with them at the kitchen table, at the kitchen. Like, let there be a time and a place to use that phone. The other thing is, like we talked about before, in terms of taking breaks. So when they're on their phone, making sure that they're aware, or helping them, let's say with a timer, or okay, so it's been 30 minutes, okay, get up, do something else, and then come back and doing it. And for us, sometimes what we do is for our kids is kind of a little bit of a give and take. So in terms of, okay, do this for, let's say, an hour, then you could have, a half an hour of screen time. So whether it's, whatever, playing, reading a book, something like that. For us, a lot of times during the summer, there's certain books that I would love my kids to read or learn more of. So what we do, it's almost like they're chores where we pay them to read the books that we would love them to understand or read about. So one of my boys just read The Four Agreements. So in terms of a great book to understand, or in terms of what he can do to be a better him, and in that sense, he gets a little bit of cash, he learns something, and it's kind of a win-win.
And it's a guarantee that he's not spending time on a digital device, right?
Exactly
right? Absolutely. Digital devices are not going anywhere.
Yep.
They're fantastic. They've revolutionized how we can do things, but they do come with their downfalls. So as long as we understand what those downfalls are and we're doing things to correct them or mitigate those effects, I think it's great.
It's a win-win. Yeah.
So just a little recap for today's Healthy Commute. We were talking about the first time we've seen bone changes in the human spine and skull based on technology use, those bone spurs at the back of the skull that are showing up at a very young age at high percentages of people with accelerated growth. So we're talking about how we can reduce that pressure to the spine, the skull, to then obviously improve the overall function of that person moving forward, not only today, but long term.
Yep.
So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out with us. And if not, see you next time on The Healthy Commute.
Have a beautiful day.